Most people's first anime would be something along the lines of Cowboy Bebop, Dragon Ball, Naruto, One Piece, Attack on Titan, or One Punch Man, yeah. But mine was a bit different. Mine was Goblin Slayer. Hello everybody, I'm the Critic Monkey and welcome to Babies First, the show where I talk about my first experience with a form of media, a genre, or anything else. And today's Babies First is on anime, specifically Goblin Slayer. So what I'm going to do in this video is break down any points what I think Goblin Slayer is good at, or isn't so good at, or anything else. Obvious warnings here, Goblin Slayer does deal with some very dark topics, and of course spoilers if you haven't seen it. So without any further ado, let's begin. Okay, so considering that this controversial scene has become synonymous with Goblin Slayer, I'm just talking about it and getting it out of the way because Goblin Slayer is much more than just a scene. If the topic of sexual assault makes you feel uncomfortable, I recommend skipping ahead or clicking off the video. Now, I do believe that this does serve some narrative purpose, like for example, it shows how exaggerated goblins are in this world, how horrible these creatures are. It also shows how underprepared these young adventurers are. It serves some future narrative purpose for Priestess' character near the end of the series, of how she's grown. It also makes some of Goblin Slayer's more brutal executions seem reasonable. Nevertheless, there are big problems, like even though Goblin Slayer does tackle the topic of sexual assault later in its story, it's very tonally out of place, and this sexual assault and murders did not need to be this explicit. Nevertheless, I am not against sexual assault being a narrative purpose, and I do believe that the creators have apologized for this, but I am getting this out the way now to move on to the good stuff about Goblin. This opening right here is art.
How's this, Squidward? It's beautiful.
Now, Goblin Slayer may not be my favourite anime anymore, but this is still my favourite opening. No matter how much I love the fourth opening for My Hero Academia, this opening encapsulates the show perfectly. Like, the D&D style visuals, the bright colours, the glow of Priestess, the little splashes of colour to signify blood, all the side cuts, the lighting, the sets, the fact that it could even change art style just to make a good, shot. It's amazing. And the music rightfully is brilliant. If you've never seen Goblin Slayer, watch this intro and I'm pretty sure you're gonna be hooked. Now, Goblin Slayer does have a lot of well written moments, and instead of me just picking one or two,
make a choice. Like, you just decide.
I just decided to go through all my favourites and just give a quick summary. There's High Elf Artress not taking goblin missions or adventuring that seriously until coming into contact with more of the wretched things goblins have done and begins to hate them nearly as much as Goblin Slayer does. Then as Goblin Slayer being beaten to a pulp, nearly witnessing his team go through unimaginable pain, reminding him of how his village, including his older sister, also went through unimaginable pain and suffering, goes into absolute rage mode, tears out the Goblin Champion's eye, and literally being too angry to die. There's also Goblin Slayers and Sword Maidens conversation about their Goblin related PTSDs, but how Goblin Slayer cannot help her because they've experienced different things and act out in different ways, but he will still serve her goblin slaying needs for her. There's Cowgirl's, Goblin Slayer's childhood friend, speech to how she will not let him lose another home to the goblins, showing how much he and her really mean to each other. Goblin Slayer's final speech to the Goblin King is probably one of the most memorable lines in the series, and also one of the most badass. And last but not least, Goblin Slayers and Priestess' final conversation about how all the adventurers came to help Goblin Slayer defend Cowgirls from the goblins. This is also the bit where he, oh my god, he took off his helmet. Guys, he just took off his helmet. Come here. Oh.
Face! Just look at his face!
And it also breaks his social anxiety and even makes him smile. Aww. And that's not even mentioning the subversion of expectations by introducing the Demon King and High Elf Archer, Dwarf Shaman, and Lizard Priest believing that Goblin Slayer is the one to defeat him, turning out that Goblin Slayer isn't the one to defeat him, but his hard work still being acknowledged and appreciated by the ones who did kill the great and powerful Demon King. Now, except maybe Goblin Slayer's speech to the Goblin Lord or the final conversation with Sword Maiden, a lot of Goblin Slayer's writing isn't on the same level as, say, Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. But I believe its writing should be acknowledged as very well done. It's emotional, it's not too quick, it's not too slow, it's well paced. And I think it should be acknowledged for the well done work that it is. Okay, voice acting for anime is a bit complicated because I only see the dub and don't understand Japanese, so not the sub. And I would like to give both sides, but I can't. But the dub voice acting is
Very nice.
I put these two things together because Goblin Slayer's animation specialty is its action. Okay, that statement isn't 100% correct, but some of Goblin Slayer's most well animated moments is in its fight scenes. Like some of my personal favourites being the fight with the giant ogre, where Goblin Slayer actually used a defense spell to give us this beautifully gory moment. There's also the Goblin boat fight, well, I mean some of it. Any fight with the Goblin Champion is beautifully done. The fight where all the adventurers come together to stop the goblins from raiding Cowgirl's farm is also very fast-paced, very brutal, and even sometimes flashy. Like, look how impressive this is. And my personal favourite, Goblin Slayer's final fight of the season with the Goblin Lord. It's probably the most fast-paced and the most magnificent. Goblin Slayer is also probably equally as good at very stylized, very dark moments. But I can't say that for sure, considering a lot of it is very recycled, but it's very stylist as well. So we've got to give them credit for how much effort they did put in for these very pleasing looking scenes. The quieter moments are okay, but I think that only really chops up to that there's not much animation in there, so they really can't make it look bad. Everything I've mentioned here is good or even amazing. But if there's one thing what I don't like about Goblin Slayer's animation... The worst part of Goblin Slayer's animation is the CGI.
Step back, I think I'm gonna vomit!
I want to meet the person who came up with this and punch him in the face. Who thought this would blend well in the 2D environments? The only good shot I can think of is this one, and that's because I didn't even know it was CGI the first time. Still, the overall animation is pretty good. Now, with Goblin Slayer's characters, they start off pretty, typical. But the way they develop throughout the series is what makes them good. First of all, we have our protagonist, Goblin Slayer, who's the loner badass who doesn't really talk to much people because they think he's weird for only going after goblins. He's ruthless to goblins, which is understandable, and sometimes people, which is less understandable. But through his new team, especially Priestess and Cowgirl, he starts opening up more and, joining the rest of the people and becoming less of an outcast and more happier. Next up is our sort of secondary protagonist, Priestess, who is kind, sweet, and the exact opposite of Goblin Slayer, being way too empathetic to even goblins, which is a problem when you're with the biggest goblin hater in existence. Besides this, it is clear that both Goblin Slayer and her care about each other very much, and even Goblin Slayer developing into a older brother sort of figure to her. And it is clear that Goblin Slayer hardened her up, as shown as she stares down the Goblin Lord's pleas for help. The rest of Team Goblin Slayer, as I call them, serve a similar purpose to Priestess, but they own have their own traits, like High Elf Artress, who's like a restricted tsundere. She's got the temper and the impatience, but she's also well-mannered and kind of nice. She's also got a bit of a drunk side, and she's involved in the funniest scene in the series.
They're highly sensitive to smells, especially the scents of women, children, and elves.
Ugh, no way! You keep that filth away from me!
You get used to it.
She also became a lot more serious towards goblins, and maybe even made Goblin Slayer a little less brutal by adding some rules to the goblin games and making it a bit more fun for him and her. Well, I mean, mainly her. Next is Dwarf Shaman. He's a bit more wise and a bit more stubborn. He occasionally butts heads with a High Elf Artress, mainly because of their race's rivalry, but it is clear that they do have a mutual respect for one another and do care about each other's well-beings. It's also slightly suggested that he understands Goblin Slayer a bit more by pointing out his tactics in armor, which for some reason none of the other characters got. And finally, for Team Goblin Slayer, there's Lizard Priest, who's a bit more polite and level-headed, with a strange fondness for cheese. It does lead into the second funniest scene in the series.
Nectar! Lunch! You want to eat with me?
That's adorable!
He also seems to be the most skilled, as shown by all the times him and Goblin Slayer are on screen, fighting alongside each other. Now the final one I'm going to talk about isn't a member of the main cast, but she's one of my favouritely written in this show. It's Cowgirl, Goblin Slayer's childhood friend and future wife, do not at me. And she's kind, she's sweet, and, an overall nice person. It's also maybe hinted at that she has some guilt by leaving Goblin Slayer's village right before the attacks. But it is clearly shown that even though Goblin Slayer's changed through his pain, that she still cares deeply for him and she won't allow him to lose anything else. Now, Goblin Slayer's characters developing isn't anything big or new or fantastic, but it is still quite good and I believe it should be acknowledged. Okay, if I haven't made it clear enough, I do recommend that you watch this show. Yes, it's not for everybody, and the subject matter will be uncomfortable for some, but let me tell you this, if this wasn't a good anime, then I wouldn't have watched or caught up with 3 fantastic other anime and 0.1% of an anime. And furthermore from this, if it wasn't good, then I wouldn't want to watch Evangelion, Mob Psycho 100 and One Punch Man. So yes, the show may have a lot of problems which it could fix in its new movie or season 2 whenever this comes out. And, you know, it's got its good characters, it's got its good writing, it's well animated, it's action-packed, and if you like dark fantasy stories, or even like the Doom games, I recommend this to you. Now, I couldn't decide on an 8 or a 9 out of 10, so I gave it an 8.5 out of 10.
And you can start it off however you want. You could start it off at episode 1 or episode 2. Both are act kind of like an opening. Or you could watch its new movie, Goblin Slayer Goblin's Crown, coming out sometime this year. Or you could watch season 2 whenever that comes out. But I do hope you enjoy. If you like the video, please like it. If you dislike it, yeah, okay, sure. If you agree with me or disagree with me, put it in the comments. And please be civil, I don't want any stupid people. And if you like some of the other content I have on this channel, I recommend you subscribe. So anyway, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you later. Muslas. Bye. That was a really anticlimactic way to end this.
Whoever did this, I'm gonna murder you.